Thank you, Dr. Ndo. Welcome back. Well, it's time now to look back on the stories that made headlines in the past 7 days. Gender-based violence coming into sharp focus, with protesters calling for justice for rape survivor Little Kwekwe. But for more on this story and other big stories, we'll speak to Media Monitoring Africa's William Bird, Wise for Africa Director, Advocate Brenda Madumise-Pajibo. And then to give us some of the perspectives on the political week that was, we are joined by political analyst Dr. Naledi Moleo. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and we really do appreciate the time that you've given us. I almost actually want to start with the big headline stories around gender-based violence, Advocate Madumise-Pajibo, because, I mean, at the beginning of the week, there certainly was the focus on justice for Kwekwe, going into as well the end of last week. And then somehow, as we got further and further into the week, there was more and more reporting of more of these incidents that we were seeing in various parts of the country, and I wanted just to highlight some of them for you. You've got, for instance, in Mpumalanga, residents there in Arnott taking to the streets, closing down spaza shops in their community as a result of an Ethiopian 26-year-old arrested and accused of raping a 6-year-old in the community. In Limpopo, all of this happening this week. In Limpopo, a 53-year-old teacher charged with raping a 13-year-old pupil. And then we just look at more and more of these stories. And I think to myself, what you make of the prevalence of it, sometimes we use the words gender-based violence and sexual violence against children is on the rise, but I wonder if it's on the rise or if we just manage to focus on it at a particular time. What do you make of that, Advocate?
Good evening, and to your viewers. Listen, we just concluded a prevalence study that was conducted by the HSRC last year. So if you focus on that prevalence study, what you are seeing and what you are hearing, it's not an accident, it's not by chance. That study highlighted the prevalence of gendered violence in this country. And so what you're talking about is but one of the many that make it to and make headline news, but they are happening at a very alarming rate. And as we speak, there is someone who is being violated. So I think what we're grappling with as a country, we think that these things we are shocked by the prevalence and the number that is overwhelming. But it's there, and I think it's good that we should grapple with it so that we can find sustainable interventions to address the gender violence that is pervasive in this country. So it's not a surprise, it's not a shock. If you look at that study, it will tell you exactly what you are seeing now.
Yeah, I for instance look at the numbers. William, thanks for joining us. I'll come to you now. You've got News 24 reporting that between the 31st of March, now I want you to listen to this, between the 31st of March and the 6th of April, 222 rape suspects were arrested. Listen to that number. And 7 of those were arrested for, the accusation of raping minors. At the same time, you've got Times Live that's reporting that in Pofadder, this is in the Northern Cape, 5 men were sentenced to 25 years to life after these 5 men raped an orphaned 9-year-old between 2017 and 2020. I mean, just the most horrific sort of stories that we're telling people here, William. And again, it's almost that question that I asked, is it the prevalence or is it just the media looks at it when we're reminded of just how ugly the situation is for our children in our country?
Good evening. I mean, sadly, it is all too often a story that kind of kicks it off, and then it reminds everyone, and then news organizations focus on it, as they justly should. So, I think the key element is highlighted by the previous speaker is that this is all too common, sadly. These kinds of criminal offenses are they are on pandemic levels in our country. So the thing that is good about this is that our news organizations are highlighting it, they're focusing on it, they are making sure that we're aware that this is what's going on. I guess the key issue is to understand some of the causes of it, who's behind these things, and critically what the state and other organizations and entities are doing to actually fundamentally shift this. You know, we talk about it, we can condemn it, but fundamentally we need to be saying, what are the steps we need to take to actually prevent these kinds of actions? Because it's not good enough to say that we've arrested this number of people. We need to be making sure that the world and our country particularly is a safer place for our children and for our women generally. You know, it's just something that we have to fundamentally grapple with. And the challenge with this is that we tend to see and hear about these stories when they are the most extraordinary and the most brutal and violent. But we know that on a weekly basis, women are and children are being, sexually assaulted. We know that we murder just under, I think it's around three children every day in our country. And these are things that we sadly become too accustomed to. So I think that what we need is a consistent focus and highlighting of what these issues are and demanding consistent accountability from the relevant state bodies. It's not good enough for them to say, well, we've arrested these people. We need to know what proactive action and preventative action we're taking to address these challenges.
Yeah, but William, and there's also the issue of how the media deals with issues of gender-based violence and sexual abuse, particularly where it's meted on children. And I think about this Justice for Kwekwe story, and if from an ethical point of view, you would say that we've treated this issue with the respect that it needs. You know, in the Jocelyn Smith trial, for instance, you had people coming forward and saying, well, the media attention didn't necessarily make it easy to continue the search for Jocelyn. So help me out with that one, and then, Advocate, I'll come back to you for that very issue, because I think it's an important one. How we talk about the abuse of children in this country, does it help, or does it actually make these victims and survivors even more vulnerable?
Depending on how we cover them, it can alter it fundamentally. So one of the big shifts that we've seen, of course, is that social media and the way they are reported on social media can have a significant impact on this. So we know that on social media, the identity of that particular child was revealed. We know that the mother, in fact, was often behind this. So you've got a lot of anger and emotions running behind this. People are very angry, understandably so, at the people that carry out these crimes. The thing to remember, though, is especially when children are involved, is to always consider the best interests of the child. So whether you're a news organization that adheres to the highest standards, the highest ethical standards, as our news organizations seek to do, or whether you're an ordinary user on social media, the key question to ask is showing this, is revealing this in the best interest of the child? Because what people tend to forget is that they're so angry about this. They want to say, look at this poor child, look at what this mother has been going through. And in doing so, they reveal the name or identity of the mother and or of the child. And what they forget in that instance is that what they're doing really is exposing that child and that family to secondary trauma. They may be potentially harming or undermining the legal case as and when it goes to court, especially if you go and interview the parent and you give details that may be used at a later date. So the thing is these are issues that really burn and anger us, and understandably so. And it's then that we need our journalists to adhere to the highest ethical standards, to remember that we need to be making sure that we're looking after the best interest of those most deeply affected. That's the family, it's the children, it's the women in these particular instances. And that means we need to be saying, let's treat them with the compassion that they actually deserve. We're all angry about this, but we need to remember that they're the ones who need love, they need support, and they need compassion in these instances. And that means don't identify them, don't re-victimize them, don't expose them to secondary trauma. The moment you do that, what you're doing is actually participating on some level, at least, in the similar kind of offense that those who've assaulted them have actually engaged in.
Yeah. Advocate, do we keep the children safe as we have these discussions?
We should. That's the obligation. We should keep them safe, right? And I think what should be driving media houses is that you are not driven by sensationalism. You're not driven by wanting to get the award because you're the first one to break the story. It should be very considered once you decide to take up the story, that you're going to be considerate, you're going to be measured in your approach, and you're going to maintain integrity of the story throughout. And as William said, the best interest of the child trumps everything else, right? And you should know, as those in the media, that the identity of a child has to be kept, under wraps, and unless, like in the Toto matter, where the mother is the one that has done that. But even though she has done so, I think the continuation from your part is that you should continue to treat that name and treat that child with the utmost respect and integrity and dignity. So we appreciate that the media is putting a focus on these issues, but at the same time, as you focus on them and you spotlight these cases, is just that all of them should be treated with integrity and dignity.
Yeah, and I think that needs to be highlighted over and over again, because while we want to get to the bottom of the scourge, you have to protect the child that is recovering physically, emotionally, mentally, and so much more. Dr. Ndo, we've obviously brought you in because from a political point of view, there's a lot to look back on over the past 7 days, but it's almost difficult to look at a discussion like the one we're having with Advocate Matumise Pajibo and William Byrd without trying to get the political perspective on this. There's this, word... Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ndo. There's the question of political will when it comes to dealing with vulnerable members of our society. I mean, are we ever going to see that being satisfactory? And do you think that it is?
Well, I think if you listen to a lot of speeches and discussions by prominent politicians, you'd always hear them talking about the concerns that they have in relation to gender-based violence. In most of the speeches that you've listened to from the past and the present presidents of the Republic of South Africa, they will always talk about their concern on GBV. There has been a lot of campaigns and projects that will talk to conscientizing people or society in general about matters that relates to gender-based violence. And the media, in my view, has also played its part. Some might not be happy, but I think media has played a very important role in reporting issues that relates to gender-based violence, reporting cases, and also making follow-ups, and to an extent of even going to the courts in order to make the public aware of the proceedings in the courts. The government and those who are concerned can do or work to a certain extent. But I think what is very central is that we need a buy-in of the members of society, both men who have got power or those that are influential. You also need to have other institutions of society playing an important role in ensuring that this kind of conscientization and issues are being discussed. These are kind of discussions that fathers should have with their boys. These are the kind of discussions that teachers should have with boys at schools. These are the kind of discussions that people who organize men conferences should also organize youth conferences and talk to young men about gender-based violence. And my view is that government has done enough, but it's also up to us as men, society in general, to do something about it.
Yeah, well, we need to close it off. And when we come back from the short break, I'll continue with Dr. Levi Ndo as we look at politically the week that was, and certainly what we're expecting in the week to come. But thank you so much to William Byrd, who's Director for Media Monitoring Africa, and Advocate Brenda Matumise Pajibo, who's Director for Wise for Africa, as we reflected on the scourge of violence meted out against our own children in the country and really what needs to be done. We are back in a moment. Just stay with us on Newsfeed PM, the late edition. Welcome back. So politically, certainly was a busy week in the South African political landscape, and we look back on some of those activities, particularly the state of the government of national unity in the midst of this budget impasse. Dr. Levi Doe, of course, is a political analyst, and he's still with us. Dr. Doe, here we are. We saw this week the ANC coming out and saying they're going to give themselves 5 days to speak to the various political parties inside and outside of the government of national unity to find a way to deal with the budget impasse. It's been such a long road for this budget. Just as we reflect on the week that was, Dr. Doe, are you still surprised that this is a conversation that as a nation we are still having, whether or not to pass and agree on the budget?
Not surprised at all. There is no party that got the majority. And of course, when there is a moment for crucial decisions like this one, you therefore need parties to be able to come together and negotiate their path through. The ANC could be claiming to be leading the GNU, but the ANC is not running government alone. There are other parties, and those parties are very much central in terms of decision making, especially in times like this one. You therefore need politicians and political leaders to be able to develop the best of their strategies, to be able to negotiate and convince each other, both inside the GNU and outside the GNU. And this could be seen as a moment that the ANC has not been through, because at national level, the ANC has always had the majority to be able to easily take decisions. And that time has passed. Therefore, the ANC has to be aware that it will not be very easy for most of the decisions to be taken, because they need to convince their colleagues in the GNU and also ensure that such is actually approved in Parliament. But also, my view is that it is also a moment for politicians to put South Africans first, so that even though they're in the GNU, they should have their own differences, but they should be able to find ways and means to resolve their differences so that when they move forward, South Africa also moves.
Yeah, there is, of course, the position of the Democratic Alliance, and I wonder, where you place the importance of the DA within this government of national unity. You've got, the Democratic Alliance writing a letter to the president wherein they've stated that if there is an agreement on the VAT increase, that can stay in place so long as we see the withdrawal, for instance, of the Expropriation Act. I mean, just talk to me about, what you foresee for the Democratic Alliance and their negotiation strategy throughout this period.
Well, I think it's unfortunate, and that is why there are some in the ANC and those outside the ANC will say the DA is negotiating in bad faith. The issue of having the GNU does not necessarily mean that the constitution is amended and the GNU has taken the responsibility of Parliament. Matters that relate to expropriation are not supposed to be dealt with by the president. These are issues that are supposed to be taken back to Parliament for Parliament to debate. But it's also an issue that was discussed in the previous Parliament. So bringing it now could be seen by many, including myself, as having the DA discussing in bad faith. But I think also we need to be able to separate issues that belong to Parliament and issues that are supposed to be dealt with by the GNU, because there could be a temptation that when issues are discussed at Parliament and Parliament has taken a decision which is authorized to do so, then such has to be turned down by the GNU. That, in my view, would be unfortunate, and it's a violation of the Constitution. There is nothing else that the president will do, especially when matters are discussed thoroughly in Parliament and all the processes and procedures are followed. And then the president will just decide not to append his signature because the other party is not able. That is not how government is supposed to be run. What we therefore need to get is that parties should be able to negotiate their ways through in the established procedures of government, and in this case, through Parliament. And that is where discussions, debates, all the minds of political parties are supposed to be taking place.
Yeah, Dr. Ndou, before I let you go, I think I'll ask you to, if you will, throw the proverbial bones, if you will, on what we could see happening this week. BOSA, Action SA, having been there to support the ANC when it was time to pass the budget. But then, of course, this week, Action SA saying they're still not in support of a VAT hike. I wonder what you see as, you know, the future looking like. Could we see BOSA, Action SA, getting a slice of the GNU pie? And really, what you think the relationship looks like for ANC and DA moving forward? What can we see in the week that comes?
We are quite lucky in South Africa that we are able to hear and follow the discussions as they unfold. What BOSA has proposed through their leader, Mr. Musima Imane, is that they've got another avenue where they could be able to get financial resources that could replace the proposed increments of VAT. That should be taken to the relevant committees and therefore be explored. The same applies with Action SA. And in my view, we should not always look at the proposals and these discussions in a negative light. We should look at these discussions that are unfolding now as a lesson and what therefore has to happen in future. And of course, through these discussions, society is able to know where government gets its funding, but also very important, it's a big test for politicians to take citizens first and ensure that the interests of society is served, rather than serving their own political parties, which has got a negative impact in some instances to the general population.
Yeah. Oh, we'll leave it there, Dr. Ndou. I'm sure we'll be talking some more to see what these political parties do in the next 7 days. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Dr. Naledi Moleo, there, who is political analyst, looking back on the political week that was.